أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله الذي جعلنا من المتمسكين بولاية سيدي ومولاي علي بن أبي طالب والحمد لله الذي هدانا لهذا وما كنا لنهتدي لولا أن هدانا الله بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم رب اشرح لي صدري ويسر لي أمري واحلل عقدة من لساني يفقه قولي. In the name of God, the most beneficent, the most merciful, we ask Allah to send His greatest peace and blessings upon Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. We praise Allah for all the blessings He has given us, and the greatest blessing being that He allowed us to be the ones who remain steadfast, dedicated, and loyal on the path of our Master after the Prophet, the commander of the faithful, the prince of the believers, the protector of the Prophet and his message, Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam. We praise Allah for this blessing and every blessing, for without Allah we would have nothing. Assalamu alaikum, my dear respected brothers and sisters, wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Today we're going further into our discussion on the vision of a virtuous community. And what we're going to be focusing now is taking off from the footing that we had yesterday in regards to the active integration that we have in our society. And today what we're going to be focusing on is in our role as Shia Muslims, as citizens in the countries that we live in, and the societies that we're a part of, do we work within the systems that we have in our societies, or do we work without those systems? Do we see ourselves as change agents within a system, or do we see ourselves as disruptors that are coming from the outside? Now, what's important for us to take away today is understanding a very important doctrine, which is called Hifz al-Nizam, and how prophetic tradition envisions us as that virtuous community to be ones, again, what we're going to discuss is as change agents within a system or as disruptors without or outside of that system. Now, inshallah, we're going to be, as we're doing every day, there's a series of questions, about 5 to 6 questions that we're going to be answering. And those 5 to 6 questions are as follows. 1, what is the doctrine of Hifz al-Nizam? Secondly, is a person who works for or in an oppressive government, or a government that has oppressive policies, is that individual a culprit himself to the crimes of that system or that government or that administration? Third, how did Nabi Joseph alayhi salam, deal with the Pharaoh's government? Fourth, from Moses to Ahlul Bayt, what was the importance of ministers? Who was Ali ibn Yaqtin, and why was he so important to Ahlul Bayt? Fifth, Imam Ali alayhi salam as an advisor to the 3 caliphs. Did that happen? How did it happen? And going further on that point. Now, in the discussion that we've having thus far, we've realized that beyond being role models, accepting and making a part of our lives the way we look at the world, the doctrines or concepts of coexistence and tolerance, there's an essential principle involved in active integration when it comes to our virtuous community. That idea of active integration sees that we are going to have challenges, and we need to see how do we work within the systems that we're living in, be it on a local level, on a national level, a regional level, a global level. How do we see ourselves as individuals and as collectively as a community within those systems? Is there change within a system, or is it one that we have disruption from outside of the system? We'll come to see in this presentation that Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, and from our prophetic tradition, from the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, all the way to the prophets such as Yusuf, Moses, and others, we'll see that actually change happens within a system as opposed to disrupting or destroying or dismantling what exists. Let's jump into the first question. What is the doctrine of Hifz al-Nizam? Now, this doctrine called Hifz al-Nizam, in our modern context, our scholars, our maraja, from all angles, from all places, from all of our seminaries across the board in our modern era, and what I mean by modern, I'm saying over the past 100 years and even beyond that, we've had an emphasis from our scholars, regardless of the systems that they were living in, we have a general emphasis on this idea, this doctrine of hifdh al-nizam, which basically means maintaining public order. So, in this idea of hifdh al-nizam, it is understood that inciting chaos, anarchy, havoc, any form of anarchy whatsoever, is something that is forbidden strictly in our faith. For one to go out and try to disrupt a system and inciting chaos, inciting havoc, having any kind of anarchy whatsoever, disorder, that's something that actually is away from faith. Keeping public order is not only something that is preferred in our belief, but is actually something that's mandatory, regardless of the system that's actually being lived in. And just a little bit more detail on that is for us to get an idea of how we see ourselves as citizens, as residents in the places that we live. So our role as citizens in the countries that we live in is one that we have to be mindful of our rights and the rights of others. Even if our rights are being taken away from us, that doesn't necessarily mean that we destroy the system or disrupt a system that we are actually on the short end or receiving the short end of the stick from. Just because my rights are being taken away doesn't mean that I go out and I take the rights of others. Just because I'm disenfranchised in my system doesn't necessarily mean that I go out and disenfranchise others while other people may be receiving rights. Again, those systems may have unjust policies, may have oppressive administrations, may have many issues within them. However, it does not give me necessarily the point from a faith basis where in my faith I'm encouraged to go out and actually disrupt, dismantle, or overthrow that system because I'm coming from a principled standpoint and my religion stands against injustice and oppression. What we'll see is that there's a general movement and encouragement from Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam, from all of the prophets before Prophet Muhammad, as well as himself, that gave people the sense of you are one of a collective. Don't remove your hand from the people. Again, keep your hand with the people. People need each other. Don't go against the people. Make sure that you are one who is bettering the system that exists. Take the example of what we currently face in our societies today. Many of us live in democratic countries, participative systems on different levels, right? Now, no system is perfect. No country is perfect. No administration is perfect. In our perspective, as followers of Ahlul Bayt, as Muslims, we are ones who are going to be engaged in those systems for the sake of maintaining public order and bettering what currently exists for people. So civic engagement, actively participating in elections, voting is something that's favorable to what? Our preservation as a community, as a school of thought, as a faith, and generally as people, as human beings. The more we are involved in the systems that rule or are that are currently existing that govern over us, be it on a local level, let's say, for example, participating in school board elections, participating for who's going to be your city councilman, right? On a state level, who's going to be your governor, who's going to be making the decisions that, for example, in the state of Michigan, millions of people are affected by the administration that is ruling on or governing on a state level. And then finally on a national level, and then even beyond that, us acknowledging and knowing the systems that we are a part of, whether we're actively participating or not, have a tremendous impact on us as individuals in what we do on a daily basis. Now, where does the faith come in enfranchising that and promoting that, or telling you, no, this is a regime or a system or administration that you should have nothing to do with because of its unjust policies, its oppressive practices, etc., etc. Now, again, we've established in previous nights on this level when it comes to isolation versus integration, the isolation never has a positive impact for us as a community, but rather integrating actively and participating in the systems that affect us as a community and affect us as individuals is the path that generally is favored by Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam and by our prophetic tradition. The societies that we live in are ones that we have to be a part of. We can't disassociate ourselves from that system and from that society. Now, again, it's important for us to see things on a holistic level and realize that we have potential not just to preserve ourselves as individuals and as a community, but also to better the communities and societies that we live in. There is much that you and I can contribute as professionals, as individuals, as entrepreneurs, as thought leaders, as academics, as people who are striving on all levels. When you are part of a society, you are contributing and you are taking. What are you doing for that society that you were a part of? Yes, you may be receiving the short hand of the stick or short end of the stick at times. However, what are you doing to affect that? And what are you doing to make that better for yourself? Again, as an individual and as a collective. Now, when we're looking at all of these fields, there's an important belief that we have, an encouragement that's had by the scholars of our seminary, which is, and we hear this time and time again, whenever we visit the seminaries, whenever we engage with our scholars, there's an emphasis on when you're in your society, when you're going back to your communities, don't only be great at what you do, be the best at what you do. So whether you're a physician, you're an entrepreneur, you're a lawyer, you're a nurse, you're a journalist, you're a marketer, whatever it may be, an engineer, a physicist, on every level, strive to be the best that you can possibly be. Not just merely in serving your family and in your community, but serving your society at large, because you're an individual, a human being that contributes to the progress of humanity. Again, look at this thought. This thought being that we're not just limited or isolated to our own bubble of people that look like us or think like us and believe like us, but rather the individuals that are like-minded and have this harmonious mind are going to use that harmony to propel a beautiful vision for the rest of humanity, which is that even if you don't believe like me, even if you don't look like me, and even if you don't agree to the things that I'm saying right now, I'm still going to be looking out for you. And I want to bring progress to humanity in a way where that you and I, our children, are protected in and taken from that protection and propelled forward with progress, and that our situation is better now than it was yesterday. And inshallah, tomorrow is going to be better than today. Again, coming all from this thought. The basic, preservation. Second, making sure that people are taken care of. And third, being the best at what we are doing, no matter what, in the ultimate service of our fellow man and ultimate service of humanity. Again, that service itself, as Imam Al-Askari alayhi salam will tell us, there's no better deed than serving your fellow man or your fellow brother. The question that comes in when we're having this perspective on Hafdh al-Nizam and this perspective of being involved in these systems, there's a very valid question that arises, and that is, if I'm, let's say, to participate in some of these systems, whatever system they may be, but particularly when it comes to governments or administrations, be it locally, regionally, nationally, globally, whatever it may be, in whatever country you're in, if I'm participating in these governments or in these administrations, is it not that if they have oppressive policies or laws that disenfranchise people, and I'm part of that administration or that government, am I not a culprit myself to the crimes of that system? Am I not a culprit myself? Do I not have hands that have participated in this and made this happen? Am I not guilty of that by mere association? Now, it's a valid question. If you participate in an organization, and let's say one of that organization being a government or administration, and they do certain things, are you not associated? Let's take a look at what the Imams tell us. Now, there's a beautiful hadith by Imam Sadiq alayhi salam that gives us a solid reminder, and it's very clear cut, a solid reminder on how we look at oppression and association with oppression. The Imam narrates this, or this is narrated from the Imam, where he says, إِذَا كَانَ يَوْمُ الْقِيَامَةِ نَادَى مُنَادٍ. So on the day of resurrection, a caller will call out, أَيْنَ الظَّلَمَ وَأَعْوَانُ الظَّلَمَ وَأَشْبَاهُ الظَّلَمَ. Where are the oppressors, the supporters of the oppressors, and the likes of the oppressors? حَتَّى مَنْ بَرَى لَهُمْ قَلَمًا وَلَاقَ لَهُمْ دَوَاتٍ. Even an individual who prepared for them a pen or an inkwell will be called. They will all be gathered in an iron coffin and thrown into hellfire. Now, listening to this hadith, a person's taking a step back and realizing, wow, what an affiliation, what an association with oppressors. And even for the individual that just literally prepared a pen for a document that was signed, let's say, right, in promoting policies that would be oppressing people. For example, let's say in some of the letters that were written from Muawiyah to Imam al-Hasan alayhi salam, or from Yazid to Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, and what they said that would disenfranchise the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, bring persecution to the Imams and to their followers, the individual that even prepared that ink and the pen for him to write that would cause this oppression for Ahlul Bayt and their followers, this person is guilty of his association, is guilty in that situation. And there's consequences for that. Let's take a look at another narration. Abu Hamza Thumali narrates from Imam al-Sajjad alayhi salam, and he advises, Imam al-Sajjad advises us, our fourth Imam, he says, إياكم وصحبة العاصين ومعونة الظالمين ومجاورة الفاسقين. Beware of befriending transgressors, supporting oppressors, or taking transgressors or wrongdoers as your neighbors. Be careful of their sedition and stay away from their domains. Again, a very clear reminder when it comes to association with people that are oppressors, transgressors, wrongdoers. And again, another thing for us to keep in mind, like we've mentioned previously, is this idea of who you befriend and who are you associating with. Imam Ali alayhi salam tells us, قُلْ لِمَنْ تُعَاشَرْ أَقُلْ لَكَ مَنْ أَنْتَ. Tell me who you befriend, you associate with, you have time with, and I'll tell you who you are. The people that we spend time with are a reflection of who we are. But at the same time, the Imams in this sense, and we're going to see in the number of examples that we have historically from the Imams and the Prophets, this doesn't mean that an individual is being assigned guilt merely for working within an oppressive system or being associated with it. Now, what do we mean by that? So the Imams are drawing the lines for us and reminding their followers, who some of the followers worked in those regimes, especially during the Abbasid Empire. They had positions within the Abbasid Empire, but they're reminding them, listen, in your position, make sure that you are not helping oppression to take place. So they're telling them, be cognizant and prudent of your responsibilities and make sure that you're not moving across that line. You have a position and you have a role to play, but always remember what you're doing in that position. And that is always for one, to make sure that justice reigns and justice prevails and people are taken care of and preserved and protected. The rights of people is not something to take lightly. Now, with each of these situations and each of these issues, we find that the Imams alayhim salam, to the fullest extent possible, that they actually, across from Imam Ali alayhi salam to Imam al-Hasan to Imam al-Hussein, to all of our Imams, what they did was they worked within the systems that they were in. Now, some may claim that we would need to fully oppose an oppressive or unjust system in order for us to fix it or change it or to bring justice about. The Imams alayhim salam actually did not do that. If you look closely into history, all of our Imams, what they did was instead, they brought forward justice and tried to bring forth policies through the systems and through the governments that they were living under without dismantling those governments, without overthrowing those governments or calling their followers to overthrow those governments. They worked within it and sought reform through it, not outside of it. Now, how did that look in our prophetic tradition from the prophets, before even Prophet Muhammad and in the lives of our Imams? We look at the third question that we have for today, which is the story of Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam, Joseph, and how he dealt with the Pharaoh's government. Now, if you look at the story of Nabi Yusuf, it's so beautiful, where this young man who was considered to be the apple of the eye of his father just looked at him and smiled and was filled with joy. He was his favorite son. And though he had 11 other siblings, Yusuf was just special. So, as you know, the story of Prophet Joseph, we're not going to go into all of the details, but when he was betrayed by his brothers, taken and thrown to a well, and left for dead, he would be picked up by a caravan, and that caravan would take him in as a slave. That caravan would sell him to one of the government officials, actually the High Chancellor of the Pharaoh of the government of Egypt. So the High Chancellor, who works with the Pharaoh under the system of the Pharaoh's government in Egypt, his wife has a liking of this boy and takes him and says, you know what, we'll use him as a servant. Maybe he'll be even like a son to us, and they raise him. Throughout the story and all of the trials and tribulations that Nabi Yusuf alayhi salam faced, you see that he goes from being a bought slave, a purchased slave, to eventually being himself the High Chancellor of Egypt. And Nabi Yusuf would ascend the ranks to the highest ranks of Egypt's government, which was led by a pharaoh, a man who did not believe in his own faith, a man who didn't follow Yusuf, who didn't believe in God per se, as we find in our narrations, that Pharaoh would eventually actually, some narrations would say, as in Bihar al-Anwar, would say that the Pharaoh actually would take on the faith of Yusuf many years later and then be a believer in God and take Nabi Yusuf as his prophet. However, throughout these many years of the experience of Yusuf alayhi salam, he didn't go on and want to dismantle the government. He didn't go on and want to overthrow the Pharaoh. He didn't go on and say, well, I have to make sure that in order for me to be involved in the system of government, that they have to assume the same faith as I. Rather, Yusuf worked within that system. He provided for that system in ideas, in creativity, in just governance. Nabi Yusuf looked at the benefit and what was in the best interest of all of the people of Egypt, regardless of their belief. But in doing that, he protected his own community of faithful people. In doing that, he made sure that his community was taken care of, was protected, was preserved, and that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's name and remembrance would reign supreme. How? Through his conduct and his action. Because people knew that if you wanted anything done, you would go to Yusuf. If you wanted things to be done in the proper way and people to be taken care of, people's rights preserved, the young, the old, the minorities be enfranchised, and the people that were otherwise oppressed. Now with Yusuf, it was different. But he didn't, again, dismantle that system in order to bring about these policies, but instead he worked through it. And he was able to attain that high status of being the High Chancellor of Egypt and ruling alongside the Pharaoh himself, instead of trying to take him down. That's one example. The next examples come through from all the way to Prophet Musa alayhi salam to Imam al-Kadhim and during his time during the Abbasid Empire. Now, the fourth question, we look at what is the importance of ministers from Musa alayhi salam all the way to Ahlul Bayt, and who was specifically Ali ibn Yaqtin, and why was he so important to Imam al-Kadhim and Ahlul Bayt? Now, in the story of Moses, you will see yet another example of what we talked about yesterday, which was taqiyya, and that is pious dissimulation. This idea of concealing one's faith or part of one's faith in order to preserve and protect one's life or the lives of others. If you see the story of Moses, you will see that during the administration or the reign of the Pharaoh, there was one of his ministers that actually, throughout the entire tenure of his role as a minister under the Pharaoh, he concealed his belief in Moses. He concealed that he was a believer in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And in fact, he was one who was making sure that there was a balance of what was taking place within the administration of the Pharaoh, so that the community of the faithful that were outside of that domain would continue to be protected, or at least less harm was brought to them. The minister was a believer in God. He was a believer in Moses. However, throughout the entire time that he was a minister under the administration of the Pharaoh, he concealed his identity. Why? To protect his own life and to make sure that he was in a position of influence and a position to be a change agent to help his community and help people altogether. Let's say the Pharaoh wanted by any means necessary to get what he wanted, and if that meant killing people, if that meant taking people's money, people's wealth, people's property, and going into villages and just massacring people left and right, the Pharaoh was going to do it. This minister and the likes of him throughout history would be individuals that would bring a voice of reason, a voice of making sure, hey, think about this strategically, think about it long term, and make sure that the policies of justice and equity that are pushed by our faith and pushed by any tradition that believes in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that looks at humanity as one family that needs to be protected, and that the faithful specifically are agents of change to protect the rest of humanity, they would be individuals like the minister in the story of Moses with the Pharaoh. He would be one to preserve the faithful community and protect people altogether. But he concealed his faith in doing so. We see that he was able to do that, and the Pharaoh had no idea. And the Pharaoh trusted him and had no other reason not to trust him, but concealed his faith. Why? Because the Pharaoh's preconceived notion of the faith of Moses was that they wanted to overthrow the Pharaoh, which they did not. But as rulers, we see throughout history, when they see a powerful movement, sometimes they're quickly threatened, and that they take this position that we need to persecute and kill and take care of these people. Why? Because they're going against us and they're going to harm our system, our society. When you look at the time of the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he had no wish to harm the Meccans. He had no wish to harm the people of Quraysh. He was from the people of Quraysh, but they were threatened by him and they wished to kill him. So the Prophet took the measures, took the means. Some of his companions practiced taqiyya. Some of his companions would go and migrate to Abyssinia, to Medina, etc., etc. But at the end of the day, they realized something, that in order for us to preserve our faith and protect our people, we can't isolate ourselves and we have to be involved. So you see this where with the prophets and even with the imams. Now, Ali ibn Yaqtin was one of the most important companions of Imam al-Kadhim alayhi salam for his role in protecting the interests of the followers of Ahlul Bayt, the Shia Muslim community at that time, our seventh Imam, and even afterwards, by being an official in the Abbasid Empire. Now, when it comes to Ali ibn Yaqtin, we realize that even though he was working in an oppressive government, a government that clearly persecuted, not like the Umayyads did, which was very open and literally taking the massacre of the Prophet's grandson and a small group of companions and killing them, on the battlefield. But the Abbasids were more stealthy in their persecution of the Shia. It was more behind the scenes. But it was a clear policy of theirs within the administration that the Shia would not be tolerated in order for them to expand in their influence within the empire. And most of that influence being on a social level, not necessarily on a political level, but socially can influence politically. Now, Ali ibn Yaqtin, in his position, we realize something that is very important for us to look at when it comes to taqiyya, which is, in our belief in taqiyya, pious dissimulation, it is not that we are concealing our faith to harm the establishment or the opposition. This is something that we need to keep in mind. We're not concealing a part of our faith or our faith in those positions of life or death in order to harm let's say, in that situation, the Abbasid Empire. Ali ibn Yaqtin did not play a role in harming or bringing about policies that would dismantle the Abbasids. They were in power, they were in power. The Imams, of course, did not agree or assent to that political establishment. However, it was a reality of the time. The position of Ali ibn Yaqtin and many others like him was rather, within the system, we are looking to preserve our people's rights. We're looking to make sure that we're protecting our own well-being and the interests of our community. And this practice of pious dissimulation, of concealing part of one's faith, is not necessarily at all to bring harm to other people. It is only used to protect oneself and one's community. Why? because their life is being threatened, because their life is, if they were to show that they were a follower of Ahlul Bayt, they would be killed, they would be persecuted, they would be exiled, they would be thrown in a dungeon far, far away, and their family and their community never hearing from them again. Now, in Ali ibn Aqtin's situation, our Imams would actually have him practice taqiyya by their instruction, in that to ensure he would not be seen as a potential threat to the Abbasids and continue quietly protecting the interests of the community, he remained under the radar as much as possible. Ali ibn Aqtin during that time was actually instructed by the Imam to change the way he prayed, so that he would evade his counterparts, because some people were raising an eyebrow and opening their eyes to see this individual because his mannerisms looked like the mannerisms of the followers of Imam al-Sadiq and Imam al-Kadhib. So they kept a close eye on him. The Imam actually instructed him to change the way he did his wudu and change the way he prayed, so that people wouldn't detect that he was a follower of Ahlul Bayt, because he played a critical role in saving many, many, many Shia lives, in saving many people that would otherwise be persecuted and killed and taken away by a regime that was simply at the whims of tyrants who wanted to expand their influence and their power. But the followers of Ahlul Bayt alayhim salam would preserve themselves in those systems by concealing their identity at times to make sure that their community was protected. Now, let's take another example, which is so important for us to realize in the life of Ali ibn Abi Talib, Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam. The fifth question, Imam Ali alayhi salam, as an advisor to the three caliphs that came before him, was Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali ibn Abi Talib an advisor in the courts of the first, the second, and the third caliphs, which culminated to about 25 years of rulership after the passing of the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him? The short answer is yes. Yes, he was. In fact, Imam Ali alayhi salam would be one to say, to make it clear as in what his position was in these systems, though Amir al-Mu'mineen did not agree or assent to those individuals and the new administrations that came to rule about after the death of the Prophet, Imam Ali alayhi salam would say, Wallah, لِأُسَلِّمَنَّ مَا سَلِمَتْ أُمُورِ الْمُسْلِمِينَ وَلَمْ يَكُنْ فِيهَا جَوْرٌ إِلَّا عَلَيَّ خَاصَّةً. By God, I will submit to whatever brings security to the affairs of the Muslims, and that this is only going to be personally on me. That the negative effect of this is that my personal rights are being taken away. Imam Ali alayhi salam, as we know, he was considered and designated by the Holy Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, at Ghadeer Khum and many occasions before that. He was designated as the successor of the Prophet in the realm of political authority and religious authority and all authority that was that of Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, upon the Muslims. Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Man kuntu mawlah, fahada Aliyun mawlah." Whoever I am his master, Ali is his master, point blank. However, after the death of the Prophet, the administrations that would come, the system that would come, would be one to actually replace the authority of Amir al-Mu'mineen. And Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam was instructed by the Prophet to remain patient and not to fight against the individuals that would turn against him, so long as his group of supporters was small. And that the reason why is, if your group of supporters are small, Ya Ali, you're not going to be able to bring effective change, because Islam was still too young. Islam was still in its earliest stages. In order to protect the body of Islam, like Amir al-Mu'mineen said, so that I can secure the affairs of the Muslims, I will sacrifice my personal rights. I have right to the throne or the helm or the position of authority that is over the Muslims, but I'll sacrifice that in order to protect and preserve the faith and the faith. During the reign of the three caliphs, we see that Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam played a very strategic role, and he was as an advisor, as a judge, as one who would often be turned to by the caliphs and in asking, what should we do in this situation? Be it in jurisprudential matters to make sure that people's had understanding of the way the Islamic law worked and God's expectation of them in religious affairs, and then in social affairs and political affairs, Imam Ali alayhi salam was at the center of decision making, even though those were the individuals that replaced him with this new administration and this new system that they had. So much so that the second caliph would famously express Imam Ali's profound impact on his own caliphate and say, "Lawla Ali, lahalika Umar." If it was not for Ali ibn Abi Talib, I would have perished. Now, we look closely at the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, and we're able to realize that though Imam Ali alayhi salam was sidelined and a new system of government was created, Imam Ali alayhi salam was pragmatic and mindful of the consequences of people's actions. So he stepped back and heeded to the Prophet's directions, not to rise against those who would turn against him. And instead, he would work within the government, within the system that he was in. Now, some people historically may misinterpret Imam Ali's actions as being one who he conceded to their authority, and that in fact he approved of those three administrations or regimes. But not at all. In fact, there were a number of occasions where Ali ibn Abi Talib made it clear to them that, you know, I am more deserving to this position than you are, and that the Prophet designated me for this position. However, you have taken it upon yourselves. And I was instructed by the Prophet not to rise against those who are in this position and have taken away these rights unless the circumstances were to be otherwise. Imam Ali alayhi salam at the time after the Holy Prophet, he had, some narrations say, no more than 12 companions that would be ones who would be able to even protest against what was going on in the new governments that would take place. But regardless, Imam Ali alayhi salam would find that as instructed by the Prophet. And you see this in Sermon 15 of Nahj al-Balagha. Imam Ali alayhi salam says, though there was pricking in the eye, I chose patience throughout the adversity, and I stayed my chest to the ground. Imam Ali alayhi salam, he stayed his chest to the ground. He didn't go and fight against those who were taking, let's say, his personal rights, his personal right to rule. We see this not only in the life of Amir al-Mu'mineen alayhi salam, in this idea of hifz al-nizam, this idea of preserving public order and maintaining the preservation of the faith and protecting the body of Islam and preserving the blood of the Muslims, which Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam had at the highest sanctity. But we see this in the movement of Imam al-Hasan, in what he faced with Mughawiyah, who wanted to challenge Imam al-Hasan and take on the position of the caliphate away from Imam al-Hasan and become the ruler. And Imam al-Hasan would come to the peace treaty. Why? With Muawiyah, which would give Muawiyah his position in becoming a caliph for 18 years in the beginning of the Umayyad dynasty. Why? Because at that time he assessed in order to protect the body of Islam, he had to make sure that this battle did not take place, and rather peace would be chosen and that Muawiyah would ascend to this position. Imam Hussein alayhi salam, as his brother did for 8 years, would follow that same policy of the peace treaty for 10 years, and then would only change his position when Muawiyah would die. Why? Because at the death of Muawiyah came the appointment of Yazid. And at the appointment of Yazid came the last part of the peace accord, which was violated by Muawiyah. That all of these things needed to be taken care of, which was, and the last one being the appointment of Yazid ibn Muawiyah, which was a violation of the peace treaty itself. When the violation of all of the elements of the peace treaty, and I encourage you to do your research and understand the elements of the peace treaty. A great book in understanding this, as mentioned previously, was the book Hussein's Revolution, Thawrat al-Hussein alayhi salam, by Sheikh Mahdi Shamsuddin, which gives you a very comprehensive, both historical and to a certain extent theological analysis of the events that took place in the movement of Al-Hasan and Hussein alayhi salam. But Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam, even in his movement, he would not go out and rally people to overthrow the government of Yazid. Imam Hussein alayhi salam would not go out and want to establish his own government. And he made this clear, that I am not coming out of a desire for power or a desire for influence. I have come only for what? for the reform in the nation of my grandfather. Reform comes within. Imam Hussein alayhi salam was a change agent within the system and the society that he lived in. The Imam did not mobilize forces to go and overthrow this government, nor did the Imam alayhi salam even take away or hide any of the facts of his movement from his people. When Muslim ibn Aqil would be executed in the palace of Ubaidullah ibn Ziyad in Kufa, Imam Hussein would share that news with his followers, his people. So much so that our narrations would say that the movement of Imam al-Hussein alayhi salam on their way to Iraq would dwindle in size from thousands to the mere 72 or 77 companions that they had on the day of Ashura. Now we see from all of Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam in answering all of these questions and seeing this idea of how the prophetic tradition and the way of Ahlul Bayt was one to be cognizant of our surroundings, be integrated actively in our society, and work within our systems that currently exist to bring about change, reform, and protect the interests of our community and protect our faith and the faithful. هذا والحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة والتسليم على نبينا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين.